I was trying to do movies right from the very beginning. That's just the way my brain worked. I loved Disney films, and my parents let me see Disney movies more than once. I remember they took me to see Jungle Book, and something in me snapped. I was fascinated by animation. It was like this magic trick that you sort of understood but really couldn't explain. After the movie, I said, "How do you do that?" They said, "Well, there's a lot of drawings. Each drawing is a little bit different. And when you run them at a high speed, they give the impression." I said, no, I know that. How do I do that? My parents were really cool. They saw that I was serious about this and kept giving me whatever I seemed to need to finish the film. And there was a Disney connection that some friends of my parents had. They showed me through the studio when I was 11. And when I met all the Disney animators, they said, "This is Brad Bird. He's doing an animated film and he's going to become an animator someday." I remember them giving me this look like, "Yeah, okay, you think you're interested now. Once it becomes difficult, you will lose interest. Nice to meet you. We're never going to see you again." So when I finished Tortoise and the Hare, I said to my parents that I wanted to show the film around. And they said, a great thing. Send it to the people you admire. Go to the top person on your list. So who's the best? I came down to LA and met the cream of the crop. And for days at a time, worked with Milt Kahl. I knew enough about animation at that point to know which scenes he did. And they were always like the best scenes. He was my hero. So it was kind of like being into acting and getting to work with Brando. He would just invent a scene for me to test some aspect of animation, and he would critique it. And, you know, he was tough. He would say, study live action. Tracing, it's a crutch, and it limits what the animation can be. If you want to learn animation, do your animation. He was a very opinionated guy who a lot of people were intimidated by, but I actually liked the fact that he had a strong opinion. People want everybody to behave all the time. Well, I don't think history is made by people who behave. I was very excited. This was my first job. And there's no other place on earth that's better than Disney. I had it all figured out, as you do when you're in your 20s. And then, of course, immediately day one, it doesn't go like that. The sad thing was I was arriving just as all my heroes were retiring.
When we got to Disney, production values had declined, layout had declined, story had declined.
A lot of the guys taking over the films were not at the top of their game. They were intimidated by young people. They did not like being questioned at all. It was not the Disney that I came to work for.
The close emotional bond that he created with Disney didn't even really exist. And I think that was very dispiriting and very discouraging to him.
These bunglers tended to play everything so safe, which is a bore.
Brad was volatile and passionate, and he would say, but Disney, we can change it, if we talk to the right person, like they could be made better again.
I was standing up for the very principles that the old Disney masters had taught me. The leaders didn't like that, and they wanted me to shut up. And one of the directors said, "Why are you so vocal?" I said, "Well, I don't think this is being very well run. And if you feel that I'm standing between you and doing your job, it is your job to fire me." And the production manager actually mimed ripping off my stripes, like, "You were a golden boy and you are now disgraced." Then they kind of looked at me and I realized, well, this is it. This is the end of a long thing that started when I was a kid. So I said, well, it's been, and I stopped. And I couldn't think of how to finish the sentence because it hadn't really been fun. The pause was filled by the director who said, "A disappointment." And I went, yeah, a disappointment. When I got fired from Disney, it was pretty bad in a lot of ways. So I said, well, I guess I have to leave animation. I mean, where is there left to go? But then I thought, before I leave animation, I'll make a little test film of what I would like animation to do and see if I can get any backers. One of the projects was an animated feature version based on Will Eisner's Spirit, about a detective who everyone thinks is dead. I tried for several years to get that made, but no studio would ever let me take off. And I was told often, no animated feature will make over $50 million, and only a Disney film will make anything close to that. So there's no reason why we would get into feature animation. It was rough. And then something happened in my family that was hard to deal with. My sister, Susan, who I love very much and was very close to, died because of gun violence. Pointlessly. She was killed by her husband. I was devastated. When you shoot somebody, you're not just killing that person. You're killing a part of all the people that love that person. I was kind of gone in that period. I don't really have a lot of memories from it. It's like being in shock. The only bright spot on that long patch of time was a role as executive consultant on The Simpsons. Working on The Simpsons, it was kind of a godsend for me.
At one point in the mid-90s, the animation business boomed, and it came about with Disney. And suddenly, everyone wanted to get into animation.
For the first time, animation was responsible for generating substantial revenue for film studios.
I remember an executive who said, "Why shouldn't we get into animation? It's like having a money printing machine in the basement."
Every studio and their mother came out of the woodwork to start creating an animation studio. Then you had Warner Brothers kind of pop up out of nowhere and start getting into the game.
Of course, they wanted to have a piece of what Disney had. And I suspect that those demands came from Time Warner because it was a piece of entertainment business that they should be in.
When we came on, frankly, I didn't know very much about animation, and I'm learning at the hands of very many talented people you have in your group. And let me tell you, we're going to make a great movie.
It seemed like a business that had a capacity for more players, and it appeared to us there was some serious money to be made.
During that time, among the projects that I was developing was an animated feature called Ray Gun. It was at Turner, and Turner was another one of those guys jumping into the animation game. But it was the kind of backing that I've come to loathe. They have you in their roster, but they don't actually want to put you in the game because that might be risky. So they have you sitting on the bench, and they can go, see how great our bench is? Then Warner Brothers bought Turner, and all of Turner's huge assets, which were the MGM Film Library, Hanna-Barbera, Atlanta Braves, Cartoon Network, CNN, and in that huge amount of stuff was me and the last 3 months of my Ray Gun contract. Then I found out Turner was going to be disbanded. I thought, well, I'm kind of screwed, I guess. But Warner Brothers, they wanted to talk with me. They made it clear to me that they didn't want to make Ray Gun, but they have a lot of other projects in development. Is there anything here that you're interested in? And one of them was Iron Giant. They were interested in making it an animated musical with Pete Townsend of The Who. But I personally didn't see it as a musical. It was based on The Iron Man, a very well-known book in England written by the poet laureate Ted Hughes. I read the book and I was really enchanted by it. Ted Hughes was married to Sylvia Plath, and she committed suicide. He used the book as a way to ease his kids' pain. The notion of being in pieces and pulling yourself together again was a poetic way to make sense out of something that was so difficult to withstand. There was some healing aspect to that story, and I was drawn to it. Maybe because I was still trying to, draw together my own pieces after the death of my sister. And I had an epiphany. What if a thing developed a soul? And what if that thing found out that it was designed to kill, but didn't want to kill? What if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? So I came back to Warner Brothers in front of the heads of the movie division and said, I have a different take on it. What if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? And everybody kind of went, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? What if a gun, But I just kind of launched into a story. And I scared the crap out of my development execs because I hadn't run any of this past anybody. It's 1957, Sputnik's in the air. The Cold War is on, and there's absolute paranoia about the Russians. This giant thing splashes down in the middle of the ocean. And then I proceeded to tell the story about this single mom. In the book, she's not single, she's married. The government character who's not in the book, the beatnik character who's not in the book. and a lonely kid. He's telling the giant about life. The giant is like a newborn child who one day discovers that he has this terrible power. My development execs, one of them elbowed another one, kind of indicate you better write this down. But I went on with the story. You have rock and roll paranoia and government agents and the army and robots. How is that not great for animation? Let Disney do the fairy princesses, that's fine. But why can't we do something that's very different? At the end of it, they were like, yeah, damn, let's do this. That sounds great. And I loved that they were into it. We want tons of good ideas. And we got, 80 minutes here, or whatever, 74, whatever I had to agree to knock everybody out. And, I don't mean like doing tons of and cutting every 2 seconds like the Disney films that sort of yammer and yammer and oh, here's the song number. Okay, here's an action sequence. It's not that.
The first time I met Brad, he came out of the gate shooting. He was dropping F-bombs all over the place and say, yeah, man, animation can be really great, but everybody's doing it wrong, and together we're going to make something bitchin' and special, man. I said, I'm signing up with this bastard right now.
Hey, Brad had a lot of love from the artists in the animation industry because of his work on Family Dog and his contribution to The Simpsons. So people were excited that it seemed like he was finally going to get a feature film off the ground.
Very happy to have you all here. I think you're going to have a blast. We were off to the races. But already the trouble was starting. You guys are finding out about it early on. Warner told us that we had to make the film with a third of the budget and in half the time of a typical animated feature. Disney had 5 years, we had 2.5. We're going to be tough on everybody, but you'll hate us in the short run and you'll love us in the long run. There was a feeling of the clock is running and things are a little bit fragile, so everybody better get going.
It felt a little bit like a challenge, like, can you do it?
Plus, the animation department at Warner Brothers had been a really expensive proposition to that point and had not delivered results. So we had to remake the department pretty quickly. Seems like we should go over a little further so that it's kind of in the center frame and just going. And a lot of the top talent was taken by Disney and DreamWorks. Make this your own perfect dorm room. So you had to grab who was available at that moment.
We had to find young artists, new artists, older retired artists that Brad loved and wanted to have as part of the team.
Brad took all the hard cases, the kind of leftovers, the troublemakers, the people that had opinions. We weren't necessarily other animation studios' first choices.
There was a lot of rebellious artists. We were seen as this odd group of people off to the side of the mainstream.
I'm working to the bone.
A lot of us didn't have the experience, so we were kind of the bad news bears, the underdogs, the ones that nobody thought could do it.
If you looked at my resume at that point, you would go, you are not allowed in. I had never storyboarded on a movie ever.
I was the producer, and I interfaced with the studio, I interfaced with the artists, and it was the first movie I ever produced pretty much by myself.
I'd never been head of story before, and I won't lie to you, I was not sure I could do it.
I've never done this before either. We were not the most accomplished animation team in the industry by any stretch. We have an inexperienced crew, and we're starting to stack up some scenes, but they're also getting eaten up, as quickly as we can stack them. So we're trying. I thought me and this ragtag group come hell or high water, we're going to make the most of this opportunity. This may be my lone shot.
We are literally in a race against the budget and time on this. And, you know, I don't want to have any apologies or excuses for this thing at the end of it. I honestly think that we can kick royal ass and totally stand right up next to Disney with, you know, a lot less money and time and just go, you know, we're here and, you know, deal with us.
But we still had a big hurdle. The Giant was the main character, and I didn't really like its visual approach back when it was being developed as the musical. So I approached Joe Johnston, who was a director and one of the principal designers on the original Star Wars trilogy. And Joe did the first sketches of what I considered to be our Iron Giant.
I remember Brad saying that the Giant didn't really know what he was intended to be. He had a very simple soul, so I wanted to make him almost childlike.
Then Mark Whiting, who was our production designer, he had some very strong opinions on where it could go from there.
Brad wanted charcoal drawings of the same head in different attitudes to show that this is something that can have expression.
And we figured out with the eyes that if we had two lids that could close from below and above, it could look sleepy, angry, sad, happy. And we could do a number of things by simply having the back of the jaw be able to slide up and down. It allowed him to be pieces of hard metal and yet able to express anything under the sun.
Making an animated film is like a marathon race, but you're sprinting the whole way. Literally making a movie one frame at a time. And it's lots of things to juggle over long periods of time.
Really, the first step in any film is storyboarding the ideas. My first assignment was this hugely important scene about the giant's interaction with the deer. It dealt with themes that are central to the film, and it was almost impossible to figure it out.
The story point we were trying to convey was what life and death might be.
When he sees the deer, there was a feeling of, whoa, what is that? But he's so enraptured with it that he reached out and just crushed it. And he had killed it. The tricky part of the sequence was, it was so devastating to the giant. He went into this depression that was really hard to believably get him out of. We had to think of how can we get this across without doing a record scratch on the whole movie.
While this is going on, Allison was saying, well, why are we spending so much money on storyboarding? And I said, if we make a mistake in this phase, it's cheap. If we figure out our camera moves and everything, then we can save the resources.
We're spending money. Every day we're spending money. And we don't have extra.
Brad was under constant pressure from the studio, so we had to prove to them that we knew what we were doing. That's where Andy Jimenez and the story reels came in. The story reel is where you give movement to all your storyboarded images on videotape. In the past, they'd always been pretty primitive, like a comic strip with voices.
So excuse me while I save my life, General.
But Brad really wanted our story reels to be extraordinary.
And so I thought, well, what's the best way to bring a still drawing to life?
did this weird program called After Effects, which nobody heard of. And he said, let me try some things. And he would scan in a few of your boards. You're going, I don't know, what is he doing? And then he'd hit play and you'd go, oh my gosh, look at that, you're actually moving through things.
This procedure that Annie was doing was unlike anything that had been done before it.
At the time, I didn't really grasp that this was a brand new thing and that we were pioneering a new way to pre-visualize your movie.
So we used this to create our story reels, and we had more elaborate story reels than they did at Disney. This was done with cheap software that you could buy at a computer store.
Computers are better at some things than people.
It'd be a better shot if we didn't have this crowding. Basically, we're trying to find a way to do it in 3D. Here's the giant, right? Standing up here.
The giant, of course, Brad always intended for him to be computer animated.
Where he's facing this direction, and then he gets tagged from a shelf.
He's this large lumbering machine. So we were very determined to make him feel massive and heavy. The computer is so good at taking solid objects and keeping them solid as they turn in space. It's something that's very hard for a person doing a drawing to do. It was the early days of computer animation, so there weren't a lot of people doing it.
In previous films, when people had used computer animation with hand-drawn animation, they always felt like they were from two different films. So we created a program that introduced imperfections in the line so that the giant would feel more like a hand-done drawing. It was actually kind of hard to get right because you're asking the computer to look flawed.
The problem is the... Oh yeah, where he actually tries to... Yeah, I'm just saying it's a minefield.
We were out of time, and we needed to know where that deer sequence was going to fit. It was so important. So I called everyone into the story room, and no one was leaving until it was all figured out.
Hey, look, it's a deer.
The giant needed to understand the meaning of death, but he couldn't kill the deer himself in order to grasp that concept. It was just too much.
We knew that he had to see the death for the story point to be made, but it can't die at his hands.
It's dead.
And then Brad brought in the idea of hunting, the idea of guns kill.
From the deer to the gun, and the giant will start to finger the gun.
By having hunters and having a weapon,
Well, I guess he decided to.
the giant's not responsible for the death. And you start to use this concept of the initial pitch.
They shot it with that gun.
What if a gun had a soul?
Guns kill.
Guns kill.
You're always trying to figure out how to make the best movie you possibly can within the constraints of the time and money you have available. This conflict between art and commerce, that's really what the movie business is about. And job number one for Allison was to be between the creative appetite of Brad and what the studio could afford and was willing to provide.
That's always the challenge of being a producer. Both sides want as much as they could get. And Brad's vision for the movie was bigger than the time and the money that we had. And so it was a very tough road to walk. I hated being that person in the middle.
A lot of pressure on Allison to keep things together. And she and Brad would, they would get into it.
All right, so talk a little bit about your relationship with Allison Abate.
In our next convenient break, can I get a water just to have here?
There were often disagreements between Warner Brothers and Brad in terms of how the movie should be made.
Okay. She, I think, showed an amazing ability to get the most out of every dollar that we spent.
My office was right next to Alison Abati, who was right next to Brad. And I felt like the little kid hiding up in his bedroom while Mom and Dad were fighting.
Between the studio's pressure, Brad's passion, and our young crew, it felt like I had to juggle all those things and get us to the finish line with a really wonderful movie. So we would go head to head on things, mix it up.
I would hear them yelling at each other in that office, and I'd think, I'm glad I'm not in that office.
Talk a little bit about collaborating with Brad Bird.
This is really hard to do. Okay, hang on a second. I have to think about this answer.
All right. Making sure that it's
Because I
politically correct.
hated working with Brad.
Both filmmakers and studios want the film to succeed, but how they get there, oftentimes they're at odds. We're here, and the pressure's on for me to approve it, and I got to go through every male star, in the top 15. It doesn't matter whether they're appropriate or not. I got to go through them before I can go to my choice. The only Warner suggestion that I really liked was Jennifer Aniston as Annie. But otherwise, the studio wanted John Travolta as Dean and Arnold Schwarzenegger for Kent Mansley. And they're now going after Brad Pitt, which is even though they're great actors and great stars, I had other ideas.
442, take 4.
I'm cool as a cucumber.
Whoa! Woohoo!
Big, enormous beast. Yeah. Biggest thing in this town is probably the homecoming queen.
Oh my God! It's a ballistic missile, Mansley. It goes up, it comes down.
There you go.
But we can't call Ripley's Believe It or Not because they wouldn't believe it.
Yeah. In other words, you got to do something at this point. So it's like you're a director. Time's running out, and you got to make a decision, and so you make a decision. It may not be the perfect decision, but it's the best you can do. So try to have my problem for a second, Eli.
Okay, Brad.
Okay. I feel like if you can keep the head turned out a little more here,
Yeah.
you'll be able to delay that action where he's pulling it up. I knew that it's embarrassing to have your weaknesses discussed in front of everyone else. But I said, you got to get over this. Basic gist of the action is okay. I think the expressions are not quite right.
So they rigged up a way to project the animation, and he would go through and give notes one at a time to everybody in the room.
The hands are doing an outward gesture rather than a inward moving in one direction. You know what I mean?
And since you're hearing what everybody else is going through, it really helped to unify all of us.
Separately, we're kind of a ragtag, underfunded team of animators, but every one of us has different strengths. If we can pool our strengths, together we make the best animator around.
It was really inspiring. Brad was in the trenches with us.
I said I'm hip. So she moved me up a grade because I wasn't fitting in. So
I tried to always do a scene or two in everything that I direct. So I elected to do this scene of Hogarth. He drinks a little too much espresso and he's feeling the effects of it. And he's on a rant about his life. It's the kind of scene that when I was starting out at Disney, I would have killed for because it's a real animation-based scene.
Get pounded too. Is there any more coffee?
Look, it's really none of my business, kid, but who cares what these creeps think, you know? They don't decide who you are, you do.
Maybe accent R a little bit, like you are. That's who you are.
Oh,
You
I'm with
are
you. Okay.
who you choose to
You are who you choose to be.
We're all in this together and we want to have some surprises. So, yeah. Don't be loading this on the internet. Any of you who are internet guys, I mean, if you have to talk about the movie, try to talk about it with some sense of having Christmas and, you know, not telling everybody what they're going to have for presents. All right, anybody else?
Do you have anything in mind to promote this to a teenage audience?
My own personal standpoint, I would sell this, and I don't know about this stuff, but I go to movies a lot, and I know what would work on me. I wouldn't be afraid. I'd say, yeah, we're PG. That's what we are. We're Warner Brothers, you know. There's Disney, and we're Warner Brothers. You know what I mean? And, you know, in other words, Mickey Mouse, G. Bugs Bunny, PG. You know, and to me that's very in harmony with Warner Brothers, and I think they should do that. I think that we should separate ourselves from Disney, but over on the lot you can spook the horses easily, and the horses can be very calm, and then one person can come in the room, you know, and go, "He hurts himself in this scene," and everybody kind of goes, you know, because they see potential dollars going. You know.
Warner Brothers was not in a good mood. They were rethinking this idea of having an animation division. There was this real fear that the studio might close down around us.
Oh, we're starting to document this thing now that everything's over and Warner's is shutting down.
You could feel the rumblings. The pillars were coming down.
Warner's, they were losing interest in animation. So they were starting to eye the exit, which meant as long as we didn't become a big drain on them, they were willing to leave us alone.
We were trying to find
If we can make something really cool before they turn off the electricity, then we kind of have run of the place.
Because the studio, they weren't in our faces, they weren't looking over our shoulders. We got to do what we wanted. We did it the way we wanted.
Yes, it is.
And we don't have as much as Disney and DreamWorks in terms of time and money, but what we got that they don't have is some freedom and some leeway, and let's take advantage of it.
All systems go! 5, 4, 3, 2, 1! Blast off! We're landing! We're landing! We're landing!
I remember looking at the rough animation for the Souls Don't Die sequence. We had a small editorial room with 40 or 50 people crammed in there, and it was just black and white, and it was rough, it wasn't cleaned up.
I know you feel bad about the deer, but it's not your fault. Things die. It's part of life. It's bad to kill, but it's not bad to die.
You die?
Well, yes, someday.
I die?
I don't know. You're made of metal, but you have feelings, and you think about things, and that means you have a soul. And souls don't die.
Soul?
Mom says it's something inside of all good things, and that it goes on forever and ever.
Souls don't die.
Everyone in the room was crying. And it was like, if it has that kind of effect now, at that level of completion, we're going to be just fine.
This film is going to soar bigger than bigger.
Well, we hope. Right now, I just want to get this thing released. I'm in that survival
Here's the
mode.
director, yeah.
Yeah.
If we had been a normal animated film, we'd already have had a teaser in the theater. Tarzan had teaser posters in the theater over a year in advance. Everybody knew Tarzan was coming. They didn't know that we were coming.
I would stand at toy fairs and licensing fairs, and they would say, this is terrific. When are you coming out? If you don't know, they can't get a Happy Meal deal. They can't get shelf space at Toys R Us. They can't make a toy. And if they can't make a toy, they go to the next booth.
It was very frustrating because we were all very excited about the film, but we were worried there wasn't enough time for Warner Brothers to properly market the film, like commercials or posters, or toys, the things that you would expect to see so that it was in people's consciousness.
I had been sent things, mainly scripts, up until that point. When he said that he had a Brad Bird movie, my jaw was already on the floor. Yes, I want to see whatever he's doing.
Off the coast somewhere near Rockwell. Wait, the lighthouse. I see it.
I remember sitting through the whole thing almost silently, but I wept at the end. And the idea that this unfinished movie, still with storyboards in place, could make me weep. I knew full well, this is an American masterpiece. This is as good as American animation gets, and I don't know if Warner Brothers realizes what they have.
Okay, now, march! Woo!
I was really pissed. Something that was not finished was being examined. But very quickly, it took on a slightly different feeling because we were having trouble getting attention. Suddenly, it got attention. I think it gave a little boost to the crew.
It was a big boost to have it on that website because we thought we had something special, but then to have it confirmed by somebody who wasn't attached to the company or wasn't working on the film, it was really thrilling. That's when we started dreaming that, this could be a big success. This could be like a blockbuster and change the world.
Finally, we had a screening, and we killed. They were the highest test scores Warner's had had in 15 years. They were like, oh, crap.
When they did finally see the film and saw how great it was, the studio did articulate that they could use more time to advertise a movie. If we released it the following year, that would give them time to get everything in gear for it.
But everybody said, no, you can't do that, because there was this real fear that it might never see the light of day.
So we're gonna come out a month later. Got that, Warner Brothers? A month later. Not the fall.
I was feeling a little bit cocky because of the scores, and I was feeling tired, and I was feeling angry all at once. And I said, you guys had 2 years to get ready for this. Just put it out.
was one of the best parties ever. Just an orgy of good feelings and good times.
If you could say one thing about Iron Giant, what would it be?
It rocks.
It rules.
I'm so young and I'm such an inexperienced animator. Brad just allowed me the opportunity. Somewhere else, I probably would have gotten the boot.
Film is the best film going, and let's all hope it makes a lot of money so we can make another film.
The best movie I ever worked on. The movie I've been waiting on my life. I can die now.
We were so confident that audiences would come out in droves to see the movie. We really thought we had made the best animated movie to date.
We knew The Iron Giant was going to be up for Best Picture from the Academy.
Yeah, come on up, Al. Come on, get up here. Okay, I just want to thank you all for doing an amazing job. Really fine work, terrific animation. And just to put it in context, Tarzan started a year before us, and they'll be finished with animation in 3 weeks. With 40 more animators. So, they're pussies!
The job that I had come from Chicago was running a small theater company, and I had fairly limited resources. I was really excited to see what a world-class marketing department could do with these, millions of dollars.
On August 6th, the latest thing in heavy metal is going to rock this crazy planet.
Run! I remember looking at the trailer and thinking,
The Iron Giant.
is this happening on our film? I hated that. But I was full of confidence at that point because our test scores had been so high. And I thought word of mouth is going to take care of us. I got up and we had a great review in the LA Times. And I was feeling very up about it and I was very excited. And I went to a theater in LA that was showing it. Right next to the theater entrance was Johnny Rocket. They were supposed to have an Iron Giant poster. And that's what they showed me in marketing. I'm checking out Johnny Rockets. They don't have a poster up. So I go, oh, okay, shake it off, shake it off. I go to the box office and they have like 10 auditoriums. And all of them have these nice logos backlit of each movie in the type font of the original advertising. And on the 10th theater where the Iron Giant is showing, it's literally a piece of white paper taped up there. So I'm going, oh, okay, strike two. Let's just shake it off. Up at the top of the escalator, there were all these big banners for whatever else was out at the time. And I'm going, where's Iron Giant? Where's Iron Giant? I get to the top of the escalator and I make a turn and I see we have a really nice 3D standee of the Giant, but it's on the opposite side as you come out of the theater. And one of its legs has been torn off. And I'm practically hyperventilating, like, nothing was right. So I went into the theater and I'm kind of looking around like, where is everybody?
It was one of the great frustrations of my career and frankly for all of Warner Brothers. We questioned whether, because we were relatively new to the animation game, had we not marketed correctly.
The Iron Giant could have been handled very, very differently. Obviously, Warner's had lost their appetite for animation and everybody paid the price.
It was like coming back to your house and finding it burned to the ground, or your parents dying. That's how depressed we were.
I don't know that I've ever felt that kind of like a sucker punch as I felt that weekend, because I thought I was going to be on top of the world, and I really felt like I was a failure.
I actually went to see it in the theater a few times just to see people's reactions. Even if it was 10 people, every time they'd stand up and clap at the end. And you were like, man, I wish more people experienced it.
The moment that the first weekend ended, it was a dirge from the people at Warner Brothers who were like, okay, that film's done. We were dead. And I thought about all the people who worked really hard to make this film. I'm fretting because this labor of love is just tanking. And then I remember Guillermo del Toro gave me a call.
What I said to him is, look, in the light of the box office, the audience, the numbers, you feel like a loser, but this will pass.
See you later.
You have made a classic. It will stay in the hearts and minds of anyone that sees it. It would honestly live forever.
Turns out from that. So
Brad, when he was doing Iron Giant, really drew upon something very personal. His own sister was killed by a gun.
Guns kill.
But underneath that is this story of trying to overcome forces of destruction.
You choose.
He was working some of that out in this film, and he made something that's very iconic and powerful.
Oh, God. It's okay. It's okay.
People who find the Iron Giant feel protective of it. It is not a film that people like casually. It is a film that people love dearly. And the people that have seen it share it with the people that haven't. And I think it's a movie that is going to continually be rediscovered.
I always tried to communicate to the crew, we were together, we're going to do this. We're going to make something different and unusual, and we're not going to go quietly. By the end of the movie, everyone was much better than they were at the beginning. Me included. That's some raw stuff right there. Like why this bird is afraid of falling, I have no idea. But it's interesting. Well, let's see, he figures it out. Yeah, it's kind of like me. Anytime?
Anytime.
All right.
So let's talk about the Iron Giant.
All right.
Hey. You get my bed.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Lynch. I'm the head of the story department, or I should say I was the head of the story department.
Is that just the fastest interview you've ever done, Eli?
Woo! Shaboom! It's about the only interview I've done.
Put it this way, we drink a lot of coffee and do a lot of hours.
I just want to check the spelling of Dean. It's W-E-L-L-I-N-S.
That is it.
Okay. Andy Jimenez. Am I saying that right?
Andrew Jimenez.
Andrew Jimenez. I'm sorry, I'm reading this off.
My name is Adam Burke. I'm an animation addict.
You guys are usually pretty funny. Is it too early in the morning or what?
Oh man, you're asking for a lot.
But basically, I'm the artistic coordinator for the show.
I don't know what to say about that. That's a really odd question.